Jerry.
We're back. We're live. It's 12 o'clock rock here on a given Monday. Okay, and this is, he said, she said. I'm the he, I'm Jay, and this is Maryann Sasaki. That's the she, all right?
Yeah.
And Maryann started by, and we're doing, this show. We do it every month. And today, and by the way, Maryann is the host of Life in the Law on Wednesdays at?
Between 1 and 2.
1 and 2, better watch that. Today we're going to talk about loyalty and the federal government.
But say the name of the show. He said, she said.
He said, she said.
He said, she said.
So, but first you said you had a funny story.
Oh, well, I have a funny...
If you don't mind telling me, if it's the kind of story that we can tell in public.
You're putting me on the spot. Well, let's just say that it's always a struggle for women in business to get the adequate respect. And someone referred to me, a senior person referred to me this weekend as an assistant. And I, took some issue with that since I'm an attorney and a colleague and a professional. And that person just came and, of his own volition, realized, had like a moment and said, that's not appropriate. So I felt encouraged by that.
Yeah. But did you say anything, or did you have a facial expression that may have tipped him off?
I didn't. I think he just thought about it. He thought about it, and he just thought about it. It happened actually on the weekend, and but that was just a little story I was going to tell you on the break. Not the earth-shaking story.
No, but it shows what I was talking about also before we began, and that's a hot issue these days.
Respect?
Oh, not respect. Respect for women.
Oh, respect. Well, it's always a hot issue. I mean, respect for everyone. I mean, big issue. One is LGBT rights and respect for, the transgendered community. So it's always hard fought. But, actually, that actually brings me into the topic we were going to discuss, because I read a book a couple of years ago called The Unwinding by George Packer. And the question he asked is sort of the question we're asking, which is, what happened to people's beliefs in the fundamental systems, the institutions of the United States, right? And his theory was that what we trade off in security in large systems, that like we had in the 50s, let's say, we now have in personal freedom, like gays being able to be married. So that was his theory of why people no longer believe in the government, no longer believe in other institutions which were, viewed to be, on our side, good for us. So.
It's a trade-off.
Yeah, that's what he says.
Yeah.
I don't know. Not buying it?
No.
Okay.
So you caught that.
Then why do we have such lack of faith in our institutions?
That's the question.
What happened?
Why? It's loyalty to the federal government.
Right.
And why do we have less loyalty to the federal government today than we did? I mean, I remember graduating law school, and there were federal agencies that came around, interviewing for jobs. And they were plum jobs. You wanted those jobs.
Right.
I mean, to work for the Department of Justice, big deal. To work for the FAA, big deal. And various other agencies that were really classy jobs. And it wasn't that they paid remarkably well. I mean, paying market, I don't think there was a big difference.
There wasn't a big difference between the private and the public sector in those days. That's one thing.
Yeah. But I mean, it was a classy thing. And part of it to me was you worked for the government. And then I told you the last time we met, how you trundle off in the Vietnam time, and now you're in uniform and you're trying court-martials. And I told you this part, and get up there and you'd start the, appearances, right? And then I got up there and I would say, may it please the court, my name is Jay Fidel, and I represent the United States of America.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow is right?
Chicken skin every time.
I'm
every
sure.
Time.
Just saying it, I feel it.
So, I mean, that's a big deal. That was a big deal to me anyway. Of course, that was in the beginning of Vietnam. Vietnam was just getting ugly. That was 1965. And I mention it, for many reasons. That's when things began to unravel, in my opinion. We talked the other day.
Well, it did. They did, didn't
yeah,
they?
yeah.
Oh, people questioned the institution. They questioned the government. They questioned, look, Richard Nixon. They questioned the presidency. You know, I mean, they were able to. That couldn't happen now.
He was
I don't
another
think.
major factor, wasn't he?
I think
And
so.
we lost confidence in the government because of what he did, and we began to characterize the whole operation as dishonest and unfair and all that.
Well, it was. I mean, they had it all on tape. That was the shocking part, right, of Richard Nixon, is they actually had evidence of it. It wasn't speculation. I mean,
Yeah.
lots of it is speculation. You know, the FBI, you know, did this or that. But with Nixon, everything was recorded. So.
President of the United States, you know, nearer, my God, to thee.
I know.
And now we find out he's a bum and a scammer. And so we begin to lose confidence in the government. And I didn't personally lose confidence, but I was shaken. I was shaken by the fact that this could happen. A lot of people lost confidence on a fairly profound level, though.
I think so. I think that there was in order to achieve certain rights, I think, in the 60s and 70s, it was a requisite to dismantle certain parts of the government because, you know, these had been the enforcement mechanisms of some very bad acts, you know. So the civil rights movement needed to undermine the government somewhat. Women's rights needed to undermine the government somewhat.
Anti-Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam,
movement.
of course. That's the
Huge,
biggest one.
the biggest thing in those times.
Right.
And it did undermine the government, and the government probably deserved to be undermined because the government was lying to us.
But but I think Packer, the unwinding, I think he has a point in terms of a trade-off, because what we were seeing in the 60s and 70s and 80s are people's personal views taking precedence over the group mentality of faithfulness, let's say, to the government, faithfulness to the judiciary. And as a consequence, we don't have the faith we used to have in our government, but we have many more personal liberties than we used to, don't we? I mean, we really do, don't we?
Don't we?
I think we do.
You know, I mean, I think they've changed. You say more. It's not more. The Constitution has been the same,
more people have.
More people
been
are
able
more
to,
exercising,
right?
And more courts are allowing in certain places, But you know, I think the essence of the Constitution is it holds the country together, and it's it's the social compact.
Yes, it is.
It's everything.
Do you think it's an evolving document, or do you think it is a static document?
I think it has been an evolving document, done a magnificent job, but I think it's now in a time of challenge, if not tipping point.
Really?
Yes, I do. I think it's hard to find out where the unravel first started. And what are the elements? You know, it's not simple what the elements are. But somewhere along the line, maybe it was Vietnam, maybe it was the press. The press changed. That's a whole other conversation. The way the press reported things, how accurately, and then when the people got up to protest what they learned in the press, then the press treated the protest as the news. Why didn't the press protest in the first place themselves?
Right.
Why did they wait for the press was limited to these ethical, constraints, and they wouldn't really speak their minds except in limited places in
right.
the editorial page. And the people, found out, not necessarily because of the press,
no,
but because
despite
of something,
despite
the press.
Right.
And I think that's more the case now. So
yeah, I think it's more the case. I agree with you. I
Yeah.
think that there was at least a public trust that the press was reporting news for the benefit of the people. I think now that there's no charade whatsoever, that it's pure entertainment and that it's just it's a money-making business. That idea that there was something sacred about the trust and they were serving the American public. I think that's history.
Yeah, the old story about the inveterate reporter who goes out there and digs and finds the truth and tells us and keeps our society right up. I think that's kind of over. I think there may be people like that. I'm sure there are people
bloggers.
like that. They had a great piece last night on 60 Minutes about Morley Safer.
Oh yeah.
And he's been a magnificent journalist for all his life, and now he's retired. So they put an hour of his old stories on there. I was really impressed. He's in that old you know, best and brightest,
Right.
what do you want to call it, the greatest generation
Right,
kind of
right.
personality.
But he took his responsibility to the public very, very seriously, unlike, let's say, some news stations that these days that sort of just feed the public things they want to hear. I mean, he took...
Many.
Yeah. Well,
You know, so they'll think about accidents and crime and weather and sports. That's what you get.
Right.
And you know, frankly, when I got out of school, I don't know how you feel about this, my immediate reaction was I had enough school.
Oh, yeah?
I took all my degrees.
I sort of
was
felt
done.
that way, yeah.
Just leave me alone with school. Now I don't feel that way. Now I feel that learning is a lifelong process, and if you abandon that, you are condemning yourself in some ways. You can't do that. And mostly, what is the lifelong process learning? It's from the media. That's what you learn. You read the magazines you like. You read the newspapers.
That's true. You can't observe firsthand. You have a mediated experience, right, through someone else's eyes usually.
Yeah. And the press has changed in that period. The media has changed, and I think what we have is a country of people whose basic education, while they were in school, is not as good as it was for some reason. You can disagree.
I don't disagree. I agree.
And then you get into your lifelong learning, or at least the possibility of lifelong learning later on, and you get those fire and accidents and sports and weather. That's what you get. So you never learn anything about the community. Furthermore, we live in silos more now because of the technology.
Oh, absolutely.
And we do not talk to people. That's why the show, He Said, She Said, is so important to me anyway, Diane. Maryann. And so what I'm concerned about is that if you live in a silo, then you don't have the communication. You never bounce your conclusions off.
We're lucky to be older, because if we were younger, that would even be more so. I mean, you go to the restaurant sometimes and see a group of 5 20-somethings, and they're all on their phone, and they're not talking to each other, and they're at dinner, right? So, I mean, I do it with my husband. You saw I do it with my husband too, or I'm involved in whatever I'm doing online, and he's involved with what he's doing online, and it's awfully lonely to not have like a physical interaction with somebody. You know, it's an awfully cold experience, really. It's not so much fun as this. This is fun.
This is fun. But more than fun, if I say something stupid, you're gonna bounce back. You're gonna say, wait, have you considered this? You'll do it nicely, of course, and I would, but the idea is that we test against each other.
Right.
You have an idea that I like that idea, and I pick up that idea as my own, or I turn it to my own thinking, and therefore we're having this kind of experience together.
Yeah, like a protein experience that's growing. It's like a growing. It's like what Hegelian thesis, antithesis,
synthesis.
Yeah,
and we're building a collective opinion together. I mean, we're not going to agree on everything, but the things we do agree on, that's really helpful. And when we don't agree, then I question my own conclusions, because I know at least there's one person out there who doesn't agree with me.
That's funny you should say that, because I've met few people that can convince me as quickly and easily as you can. So I hope it's true. I hope that I maintain a rigorous critical thought process. But you convince me. But maybe it's because you're so charming.
Could be.
I think so, partly.
But now, so if I'm only on the cell phone, and I'm only doing social media, and I'm only looking at, excited sites, and I'm not really getting the kind of in-depth critical thinking kind of opinion, then over time, I think it's like when you get old and you don't do anything, your brain begins to deteriorate.
I've seen it.
And the sharpness of your opinions and your critical thinking deteriorates if you don't engage them. Mm-hmm. You must engage them individually and we as a society.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating to observe people that continue to work. I'm thinking about a mutual friend of ours that practices law. Or there were some Tibetan monks that were teachers of my ex-husband's, and they were in their 90s, but they studied every day. They had, a scholarly life. They taught every day. They meditated every day, and their minds were as acute as they'd ever been, possibly more. you know?
Yeah.
Yes.
I really feel there's something to that. You can stave off Alzheimer's, you can stave off senility.
I think that's right.
If you keep it going, because somehow the exercise of your mind staves off the plaque.
Right.
You know, that plaque they
Well,
talk
you know,
about.
I have a habit of reading the obituaries, which maybe I'm a little too young to do, but I do. That's like how I start my day. And I'm always, every time I see 96-year-old astrophysicist, you know, I'm like, yes, it's because he was an astrophysicist or a Nobel Prize winner. They live to these, like, you know, great old ages, and I have to think it has something to do with thought and thinking and constantly inquiring about your surroundings and, you know.
Yeah, and you know, they're going to come up with some drug on Alzheimer's. They're going to figure out about the plaque.
So.
And they're going to figure out, you know, some combination of vitamins or who knows what, or maybe some kind of lifestyle thing that actually prevents Alzheimer's. But that's not the entire solution. You still have to exercise your mind and think with your mind.
Yeah.
And the more you do that, the better off you are. And the more engaging, I mean, you know, one-to-one human.
The
man
happier
is an
you
island,
are, right?
you know?
I mean, you're happier.
You're happier, and you have a place in the world.
Right.
You can establish your identity by talking to people. Isn't that, it's basic, I think.
Because what happens to old people, too, is that they do lose their place in the world. They do lose their function, and all of a sudden they're treated in a different way than they're used to being treated, and I don't think they like it very much, but I don't think they know how to fix it so well.
They don't know how to fix it.
Right.
Well, now you may think that all this discussion has nothing to do with, you know, the individual's relationship with the federal government and with government in general, but it does. We're working our way down that road. This is a very important, you know, preamble.
Protein experience.
Protein experience affects loyalty to our federal government here on He Said, She Said with Maryann Sasaki and me. We'll be right back. We'll show you more.
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host the show called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. We go beyond outrage to find solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I hope you will join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We broadcast live from thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and bye-bye.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker. I'm the host of Business in Hawaii. We air every Thursday at 2 o'clock on thinktechhawaii.com. We broadcast from the ThinkTech studios in downtown Honolulu, and we talk about positive and successful companies in Hawaii. People that have been successful despite the obstacles. They all have a good story to tell. Hopefully we'll see you on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Aloha.
Bingo, we're back. We're in the mix of this now. So let me ask you, Maryann, so what's the relationship with all that biochemistry? I want to lay this one on you.
Oh, thank you.
The biochemistry and our loyalty to the United States federal government.
Well, you know, you could say that, you know, the older and more engaged people maintain, the more suspect they become of large institutions. I mean, they've been through the mill, they've been through Vietnam, they've been through civil rights movement, and there's a higher level of critical thinking. Maybe, you know, when we were accepting jobs so happily in the 60s, we weren't really critically thinking about what it was we were doing. I mean, it was an honor, it was great, but
wow, that's an
what were you
interesting
doing,
point.
really?
So I come out here, and I'm in love with the federal government. I was living at the Pagoda Hotel, and on the top there's a laundry room, and I start chatting up this guy who's doing his laundry up there. This is 1965, and I represent the United States of America in all those courts martial. Okay, the guy says to me, well, you know, I work for this unnamed government agency, and we fly helicopters with Gatling guns, and we shoot villages up, and I don't think it's too good, but that's what I've been doing all day. And I'm here in R&R. He's a civilian. Mm-hmm. He's probably CIA or something. Mm-hmm. And he's telling me the story about how he feels bad about shooting people up with a Gatling gun
well,
for
it's
no
good
reason.
He has a conscience. He at least still has a conscience. I mean, you know, he's not a psychopath.
It's funny who you meet in the laundry room.
Right. So what did that?
But that was
change
happening.
You?
Yes. That was very bad. Mm-hmm. That was the kind of thing where you're effectively a war criminal, murdering people for no good reason. Ordinary civilian people, You know, I'm not military. And, you know, and I think that was happening at the same time that I personally was infatuated with doing, you know, representing the United States.
Right.
So you're right. Your
It's
point
hard
is
to
well
stay
taken.
I mean, it's hard to stay innocent over a long. You know, who would have said it? George Bernard Shaw. If you're a liberal when you're 21, you're a genius. But if you're a liberal when you're 45, you're an idiot. You know, I mean, it's kind of like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You get the older you get, the more cynical you become, and the more you look beyond the surface. Maybe.
Well, that goes to the point, okay, of did we as a country lose our loyalty, our awe of the federal government, okay, in one moment?
No.
In one incident, one strategic event? No.
No, because it still has the power. It's occasionally they'll play Hail to the Chief. The president will come walking down, and you'll be like, "I live in America." I mean, they still have it. That, you know, they're not. It's not completely gone.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
So I mean, you know, I think it took a long time to get there. I mean, I didn't get to a point of cynicism from the moment in the laundry room, but over time these things build up, and
Right.
after a while you begin to see the reality, and maybe you don't feel exactly the same way. I'm still very patriotic, and I told you before, I still believe the federal government is us.
Well,
It is the
I
social
do
compact.
too. I mean, because you're right. Though we shouldn't let a few bad apples ruin the whole bunch, right? That's sort of the philosophy there, right? It is the people. It is of the people. You know, I think President Obama has elevated the office of president back to a place where it has dignity and gravitas and has gained more respect than it had in quite a while. You know, whether you agree with his politics or not, the guy's a, you know, studious, intellectual, serious guy. He's not a, you know, cowboy. He's not a, you know.
Who do you think the greatest president was? The one who engendered most loyalty from the people?
FDR.
I was going to say the same thing.
FDR. I couldn't talk to my grandmother about FDR without her bursting into tears and her saying, "He saved my family from the Depression." I mean, literally, I'd often try to have discussions with her about that period because it's fascinating. And she was so loyal to him for, you know, what, 50, 60, 70 years. I'm loyal to him because of her, you know?
He was a master politician, though.
Yeah.
He knew how to get around.
Yeah.
He knew how to say no. He knew how to, you know, curry favor with
Art
the
of
right.
the deal.
Yeah, make deals. And what is so interesting to me in retrospect is that he was in a wheelchair, and the press never took pictures of him in a wheelchair. So they were like playing his game.
Right.
They were presenting him as somebody who was not handicapped.
Right.
And you say to yourself, well, that's an understanding. The press doesn't have that kind of understanding anymore. If they find something that they think people would be interested in knowing about, bang.
The more salacious, the better. You know, the New York Times did a big cover story on Donald Trump and his relationship with women. And frankly, I'm not a big Donald Trump fan at all. But I think that the story was a very thin story. The guy ran beauty contests. Yeah, he was going to be around women in bathing suits and, you know, women, beautiful women. So I'm not shocked that that's what he did. The thinnest, most salacious detail is the press loves that. They love that. It's harder to maintain a sort of sense of decorum and respect for the office because this other stuff sells so well. I mean,
well, that goes to the question of how you should read the newspaper. You know, and I have come more and more to the conclusion that even in the New York Times or the Washington Post, great papers and all that, not every story is a real story.
Oh, no.
Some of them, the writer is sort of, it's a thin story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't tell us much. We don't need to know about it. And he's just he's finding something salacious or something, kind of yellow journalism kind of thing. And you have to make that determination early on and say, that story I don't care about.
You know, I'm not a big anti-mainstream media person, but I will say that there are sites like the Intercept, which is, and I always mispronounce the name, Pierre Odermeyer's site, or Meteor, that tell the true story. You have to go to, there are places online, there are places, even in paper, that tell the true story. But I wouldn't go to the New York Times and say, this is this is, it. This is all that's going on. I'm going to take this as word.
Yeah, you can't do that.
No.
I mean, and I think it's partly because it's so competitive, and because when you go to the big capital concentrations, they're interested in selling newspapers or selling TV time. It's a business. I went to the NAB show 2 weeks ago with Carol Montley, and what we saw was money. Huge amounts of money.
Right.
Network television, I mean, all about television is huge amounts of money. And it's a capital concentration. It's been consolidated.
Right.
So there's actually too few players, on the platform. And that's very scary because they have such a huge effect on public opinion.
They really do. But that's what's so great about the internet, though. It's so insidious. It's so invasive. A tiny person can break a huge story. I mean, that's what makes it great. You can really, if you're diligent, you can be heard. You can get your story out there if you're really, really diligent about it online.
And that takes us to the article that you sent me, which was actually from the Times.
Yes, which I read it diligently. I don't believe it, but I read it.
That was yesterday.
Yeah.
By a guy named Greg Easterbrook. And we had already decided, we were talking about loyalty to the federal government. And then this article pops up. And this article is very thoughtful, even philosophical. This article has a long throw historically. And the title is, When Did Optimism Become Uncool?
Right, like we the people as optimism, right?
Summarize so they know.
Well, basically the article posits that why are we so negative when actually some things are getting better? I mean, the racial divide has been bridged. The environment is actually getting better. The job situation isn't exactly the way it's painted, but yet people seem to have a negative view of the government and the way things are. And, in many ways, things are better. So I don't know.
And he goes through a long list of things that are better. And at first, I'm saying, come on, he's just making it up. But then you read this list, and he's right.
But he's right.
There's a lot of things that are better than they were only a few years ago. We have better medicine, better technology. We have, in many ways, better opportunities to express ourselves.
Well, would you go back to the 50s? Yeah, no kidding. I mean, would you go back to the 50s? The 50s, we had a lot of faith in the government. It was, bright, shiny, monolithic, a lot of jingoism. Would you go back? I wouldn't.
No, I didn't like the 50s.
Yeah, too many things swept under the carpet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, civil rights.
People were making things up.
Right.
And I mean, if you had to figure one important metric on this is, do we live in a time where people can lie to us and get away with it? Now, they still can.
Yeah.
But then I think we live in a time we can catch them on that.
Right. I think you're right.
But the individual must still read the paper and decide whether this story, this expose, what have you, is worth knowing, worth reading about, or whether it's just looking for readership.
But this article actually makes a good point that you do have to read critically and not read the bad stuff as overwhelming the good stuff. So you have to be critical on both sides of the coin, right? You have to say, okay, the government is engaging in some bad things, or the church, let's say, is engaging in some bad things. But you also have to look for the positive points, because there are positive points. And when you ask why people stop believing in government, I mean, it's a little bit of this negativism. We need a little more optimism, a little more faith in the future. We had so much faith in the future in the 60s.
But if I go and write a story and say everything is healthy and great, nobody's going to read that.
No,
that's why this is such an unusual article.
I know, but this guy caught your eye, right? He caught my eye. I was like, that's interesting. Right. I wouldn't go backwards. You know what I mean?
This you know what this goes. You say that we're going to take a break in a minute.
Okay.
But you say that 50s weren't so good. I say the 50s weren't so good, and if you compare the 50s and now, as Easterbrook does, he's right. The 50s or the 60s.
Depends on who you are, also, whether the 50s were so good for you or not.
Yeah, but it's a kind of connect the dots thing. You cannot make that analysis. You cannot appreciate it. You cannot make the comparison unless you have studied and you remember and you are conscious of history. It's that old thing, George Santayana. He who forgets history is doomed to repeat it.
Right.
And we must all study history. And I think if you're looking for one of the failures of our educational system, it is just that. We do not have those kids study history. They cannot make the comparison. They are rudderless. They don't know how this age compares with that age.
That's true. That's true. I happen to know some high school kids, and it's true. And they're smart kids. And it's not that they're not smart kids. They have very little context.
Yeah.
You need context in order to know whether something is right or wrong, or a good thing or a bad thing.
Right.
So what happened with education? Well, it got much more expensive, much more inaccessible, and less good. I don't understand. That's one of the, he doesn't cite education as one of the things that are better.
Good point.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. It's getting good now. You can see we're really honing in, you know, on loyalty to the federal government. We'll be right back for more.
Aloha, how you doing? Welcome to Hibachi Talk. Gordo the Texar here. We're here every Friday from 1 o'clock till about 1:45, and we talk tech with many, many great guests. So I got Andrew, the security guy who helps me co-host, and I got Papi Chulo who comes in once in a while to help us through the show. So please come join Hibachi Talk every Friday. Angus will be here too. So remember, like we say at the end of every show, how you doing?
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, which streams live on thinktechhawaii.com, uploads to youtube.com, and broadcasts on cable OC16 and Alelo 54. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
Hi, aloha. My name is Chris Leatham, and I host a show called The Economy and You. The show plays every Wednesday at noon, and on my show, I bring on guests who are interested or working in the technology space. And so I'd like you to come and watch the show and learn with me about all the sort of exciting things that we're doing in Hawaii to build and grow our economy ecosystem. So I'd like to say aloha, and I look forward to seeing you on the show. Thank you.
Bingo, we're back. Wow. You know, this kind of, I love this show, actually, Maryann.
I could talk to you anytime.
Yeah. It's like it's like free association, and, you know, it brings everything together somehow. So anyway, Trump and the article on Trump I'm talking about during the break. So the Times went after him and did a job on him. And I think they did a job. They wrote that article. The guy who wrote it or initiated it, you know, he figured that people wanted to hear Trump bashing, so let's do some Trump bashing. Right. That doesn't make it true.
Nope.
I mean, I'm not necessarily a supporter of Trump, but I think he's a phenomenon we have to see, because behind him, there's a lot of people who want to see him succeed. Why?
Well, you know, I'll tell you two things about, I dislike Donald Trump immensely. I would never vote for him, but I'll tell you something, the two things that I think Donald Trump has been right about. One, and we discussed this, that the election is rigged. Now, he said it was rigged because Cruz and Rubio were getting these votes, and then they try to gang up against him. Kasich and Cruz try to gang up against him. But it's
actually a larger issue than that.
Yeah, it's the Democratic race is rigged also. So I give him a lot of credit for saying that. I really do. And the second thing I give him a lot of credit for, and this is going to be very unpopular because it's kind of 180 degrees different than the New York Times. I think, with respect to Hillary Clinton, that when he says she tolerated Bill Clinton's behavior and sort of turned a blind eye, and in fact participating in destroying these women that were coming forward, I think he has a point. I really do.
I do too.
But you can't say that as we're lefty. Well, I'm a lefty anyway. You're not supposed to be able to say that.
Why did she do that?
Because she always wanted to be president ever since she was 3.
There it is. And this somehow besmirches her, in my view.
I think so.
She capitulated on some important principles. Most women of character would not have tolerated it.
I think so.
And she tolerated it for an obvious reason, and now we're playing all of that out.
It's more than just tolerating an unfaithful husband. She participated in the sort of redemption and reconstruction and revision of the story so that they wrote the story, which, you know, you have to always be suspicious of, people talk about history, of the ones that write the story,
the narrative,
right?
So to speak, yeah.
Who has control of the story, so.
So there's just one, you know, it's another example. You get education, you get the press, you get government officials who really don't measure up to the standard. They're not FDR in any way.
No.
And people don't trust them, and then you find these things popping up. that demonstrate that you shouldn't trust them. And after a while, not right away, but after, say, 30 years of hearing that, our generation had become somewhat cynical about it.
Right.
Not completely, but we more realistic, if you will, about how it works. Other younger generations are worse. I don't know why, but they see protest after protest against the federal government. They participate. They don't like the system. They don't like what the federal government has been doing all of their lives. There's never been a moment.
Well, I'll give you an example. I know somebody who just took a large distribution for their 401k, okay, to pay off a student loan. Now, don't you think a distribution from a 401k to pay off a student loan ought not be taxable? After all, it's a federal student loan, right? The money is going right back into the coffers of the government. No, that money is taxable. So if I was a 25-year-old kid or a 30-year-old kid and I had $200,000 of debt behind me and I had to, my parents were going to crack into their retirement so that I didn't have to live a life of indentured servitude, I'd be pretty negative too.
Well, but it's not the 401k. Because the concept there is it wasn't taxed to begin with.
I understand
that happened
that.
Without tax. And so, whether it's for education or anything else, it has to be taxed at some point. The problem...
It's double taxed though, right? No? There's a
never,
penalty.
The kid that you're talking about doesn't want it to be taxed at all.
Yeah, right.
And that is the question. Not that you took it out or didn't take it out of the 401k. The question is, are we doing the right thing in terms of incentivizing education? We're not, educational expenses are not deductible.
No.
You pay with your hard-earned money
right.
after it's taxed.
Right.
And if we want a well-educated, society, like many, many other places in the world, education is free or really cheap, then you have to give incentives. And we have not done that. I don't understand why we haven't done that. If we care
because it's
about
monetized. It's just like with the same. We're talking about news. It's the same thing as news. These things become not. It's not an institute of education. It's not a service to the people, a journalistic service to the people. They become businesses, and then once you monetize anything and it becomes a business, there's no loyalty to anything but the bottom line.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what happened with colleges. I mean, they became businesses, more and more expensive, and
So people they don't have the same obligation to community. They're turned in. All my career, I was always interviewing young lawyers looking for jobs. And, it's changed. Every decade, it would kind of change. At one point, I remember they all said, I want to make the world a better place. They all said that. Every one of them said that. They didn't care about the money. That's not like that now.
No. But they also have $200,000 worth of debt where 30 years ago they maybe didn't, or 10 or something,
So, but they have lost, for that reason, and others, they have lost their feeling about doing good for the community.
Right.
I think that's so. Now, there are other people who want to do good for the community, but they see protest as good for the community. It's all linked up. We protest everything, and that is community service.
Well,
is it really?
Depends on what you're protesting, right? I mean, environmentalists do a lot of protesting, and I think they're doing the right thing, and they've gotten a lot accomplished. But I would like to explore with you why there is no sense of civic duty. We talked about the other day that, when I was in high school, there was a very specific class, civics. You took civics, and in civics, you learned how to become a citizen. That's what, you don't hear people talking about being a citizen anymore, a good citizen, or these are the obligations of a good citizen. We don't feel like citizens even, I think, and nobody uses the term anyway.
Well, if you walked out on Bishop Street and asked anybody passing by, what does it mean to be a citizen? I think you get some really interesting and crappy answers.
Right. And understandably, the institution has been a little tarnished because of some of its behaviors over the past 50 years. But, we were also talking about ancient Greece. If you don't have a participatory group of people, if people don't participate, you're gonna.
It'll be ancient Greece. There won't be any Greece.
Yeah, right. If people don't participate in their common good, then that leaves a door open for a dictator or somebody. So
falls apart.
Yeah.
I think you can make a pretty good case for the fact that for the lack of civic engagement, where people do support the government, feel that they are part of the government. We're in a
Vote.
bad
People don't vote.
They don't vote. In Hawaii, they don't vote. Why is it they don't vote? Now, you can make the argument that Hawaii is still into this sovereignty and we're so far away, we don't think much about Washington. But hey, 40%, 42% voting, that's ridiculous.
I don't think it's that. I think they just feel that, well, my vote doesn't count because it's later than everybody else's vote. But every vote counts. I mean, this is your way to speak and be heard. And
it's a cop-out to say my vote doesn't count.
No.
But nobody's vote counts.
Right.
And that's really tragic. So we have lost the sense of counting, of participating.
Right, of the ability, the faith that this goes back to the rigged system. We've lost the faith that actually our vote will count for one vote and we will be able to elect a person of the people.
This happened, and you and I both know about it, when Bernie won 70% of the popular vote in the caucus, 90 days ago, here in Hawaii, and the Democratic Party said, we don't care about that.
No.
We only represent 30% of the popular vote, but we're going to vote all our votes in the convention in favor of Bernie. That's really offensive.
It is because of the superdelegates, he was losing right at the outset, 0-0, and he was losing because the superdelegates had already decided they were going to vote for Hillary Clinton. But yeah, I mean, it's understandable why people don't want to vote if. Hey, it doesn't matter one way or another who I vote for, and it's the same thing about having faith in the system, Hey, whether I pay my taxes or not not going to matter. They're not going to go for public good works or,
Yeah. And so when you say your vote doesn't count, that's a big statement.
I think it is. It's a very sad statement.
We've fought wars. We had the revolution on forward. For the proposition that this is a government by the people. Lincoln said it, of the people, for the people, and it doesn't feel like that anymore. It feels like it's a wild horse out of control. There's a few bad guys out there who don't care about us running it. That's what people think.
Well, somehow people have inside information that we don't have, and they're doing things in ways we don't know what they're doing, and all of a sudden it seems like it's a done deal, whether it's getting into a war or I was for a single-payer insurance system. That seemed to just go away, without any discussion. It's just that things happen a lot behind the scenes, it seems to me, and we don't get to decide those.
I think it's part of the civics, though. I mean, if you understood it, and if you understood not only your obligations, but your powers, your rights,
your privileges,
to engage in it, to be part of it, to change the way it goes, to actually change things, then you might feel better about this. And one of the things that I think comes out of the discussion about not having civic engagement, not having a civic understanding, is the fact that you can go through your whole life and never have any other relationship with the federal government but paying taxes.
Right, we discussed that.
Yeah, and so the Peace Corps it doesn't really work anymore. It's marginalized. It's back burner. There is no draft. I wish there were a draft because it would show generation after generation who we are, who they are.
I think every citizen should participate in public service for several years, 2 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
I think the country would be a better place. The citizenry would be a better citizenry. Because one thing I've learned moving to Hawaii is that military service is really character building, because in New York you don't know anybody in the service. Everybody's these little arty liberal types that you don't see armed people. But I've met some people here and I'm like, wow, military service, that really is character building. That really is good.
Not only that, but it gets you around the country.
Or the world even.
And the world, right. I mean, you get to see what's on the other side of the track. That was the interesting part of the Great Generation, that those guys from Brooklyn, pardon me, Brooklyn.
My Brooklyn.
My Brooklyn, Maryann's Brooklyn. I'm from Queens. They got to see the world. They learned a lot. They engaged with people everywhere.
Oh, absolutely.
And that made them, in part, that was a factor that made them the Great Generation.
Absolutely. And then they were able to go on the GI Bill and put some of that sophisticate or learning to use and build a tremendous economy and a tremendously stable society.
A new world. That was really vital. And it was the best thing that happened in a long time. We don't need a war, but we need another
Public
great generation.
service.
Public service. They learn about it in school, they vote, they get around, and they appreciate their civic duty in some way, somehow.
You know, I have to say one thing, this is off subject, but it's about FDR, and I think that one thing that made FDR so noble or so such an important president is that he was like a class trader, you know. I mean, he helped people that were not of his own class, and you know, that is unheard of now. This is the problem with Hillary Clinton, right? And everybody's afraid Hillary Clinton's just going to help Goldman Sachs, the people who are, you know, involved of the Goldman Sachs select group. But that I just wanted to say that because that's one thing that endears Roosevelt to me so much, that he could see beyond his own privileged, cosseted world to a greater world, you know.
Yes, I feel the same way about it. He didn't have to do that.
No, he did not.
He could have been sitting smoking his cigars somewhere.
Rich Scion, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
S-C-I-O-N?
Yeah,
Scion of Tuxedo Park or wherever he was from.
Yeah, up the Hudson.
Right.
Okay, we got to close now.
Okay.
We're done for this time.
Okay.
But we can revisit this and connect it up with other issues next time.
Can we?
Yes, we can.
You promise?
Yes, but you
Okay.
have to close.
Okay.
Okay, this is Maryann Sasaki. She's the she said part of the he said. And we're talking about loyalty and the federal government. She is now going to close our show.
Okay. I'm Maryann Sasaki. I've been having a wonderful conversation with Jay Fidel. This is He Said, She Said. Watch for it once a month between 12 and 1 on Mondays.
Thanks, Maryann.